is, and we can make this a discussion. This ain't got to be all me talking, because I want to hear some of y'all point of views too. So yeah, we all up in here. What's up, Eve? New Black Media Archive. Yeah, we so like the neo soul era, quote unquote. It's sort of, that's a label that people from that era really don't even like. Like Erykah Badu can't stand the label neo soul, and I understand. I understand why. That's because the neo soul era was an era, and I highlighted this on my show I did yesterday. That was an era where the industry tried to other what's otherwise known as genuine rhythm and blues. You know, the bluesy sounds of Erykah Badu's voice with the rhythms of the production. And that era basically saved music. Because what happened in the 90s, they really, really, really tried to make it plastic. And they did make it plastic. And that's when the hip hop touch got put on to R&B. And effectively what happened was the live instrumentation, the background singing, the orchestration, the movements, the bridge, the tags, the all the elements that will make rhythm and blues such a interesting form of music to listen to and masterpieces of art. That all got taken out because everyone had gotten conditioned to the hip hop flavor. So when D'Angelo dropped Brown Sugar, I remember sometimes some people were trying to label that jazz, and it wasn't jazz; it was just rhythm and blues. But it was non-plastic rhythm and blues. And then you had Urban Hang Suite by Maxwell. You had you had Erykah Badu, Lauryn Hill. You had Raheem Devon later on that came out. Kim later on came out, and Jill Scott. And that era was it countered what was going on in mainstream R&B. And when we look back at that era, we all know those weren't the people getting all the awards, getting all of the radio time. For instance, I remember out here in LA, we had the Steve Harvey morning show. That it started out here in LA. When he got his first morning show. And he got Shirley Strawberry from John London in the House Party, which was the previous show on 92.3 The Beat. And then they got Steve Harvey. And that was around the same time Who Is Jill Scott dropped. We're talking 99, 2000, my first year of college. I remember when his first year on the radio was my first year of college, and I would listen to that shit on a bus stop. And then, but I remember Steve Harvey like really championing and campaigning for Jill Scott, like really pushing for her. Like, y'all play all this BS music. Why can't Jill Scott get radio play? And this at the same time, the thong song was popular. You know, dong 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 dong. And I remember Steve Harvey was like, "We can play the thong song twice an hour, but we can't play Jill Scott." It was a struggle for that sound to get on the radio and to get any kind of play. But the music was so good. The music was so good, it had to get play. Blue Cantrell, when she was more radio, but she still had the soul. You had a Jaguar Wright. You had Tweet. You had that whole sound. And that was basically anti-radio during that time. And then we look back, we're in 2022. When we look back on the late 90s and the early 2000s, what's the music that still doesn't sound time dated? See, when you go back to a lot of 90s music, I saw somebody share this post, and they were like, it was somebody that was younger, was like, and a lot of people my age were mad, but the young person was right. The young person was like, music from the 90s sounds outdated. And they were right. and I couldn't get mad at him because in the 90s, you had in the 80s, and even now, when it comes to radio, they use the most current sound, the most current computer, the most current keyboard sound to put in the music. But when you use a more current sound, this is for the music producers out there. Whenever you're always on the newest current sound, you're time stamping your music because next year it's going to be a new sound put into that program that people are going to buy. And so when you have the newest, most up to date sounds and samples, you're putting a timestamp on your music. The neo soul era, there is no real timestamp because they use authentic live instrumentation and they use humans to put together. Me, my bad. Y'all there? Got my man Craig calling me. I gotta call that nigga back. But can y'all hear me? Hit the button if y'all can hear me because I know sometimes. Okay, you hear me? Okay, cool. I know sometimes we get a call to come through. It throws things off. But anyway, so I lost my damn train of thought. Oh yeah, so we talking about neo soul. So that whole neo soul era brought back the live instrumentation. Thank you, D'Angelo. The Roots. That whole sound brought in that authentic sound that preserved live instrumentation for music for people like Anderson .Paak to pick up later on, J Mo and Jasmine Sullivan and these artists. So for the people out there that are listening on YouTube later on, know that the sound that saved live instrumentation and good music production was that neo soul sound of the late 90s, early 2000s. That's what preserved things to get to the point to where now you can get independent artists like Yasmin Lacey over in Europe. She's great. You got people like it's PJ Morton and Corey Henry. They have a vein to live to thrive through musically because of what the neo soul era did for us musically. And I don't know if people understand that like the whole neo soul sound we talk about like Japan and especially Eastern Europe, all through Europe. That whole neo soul era is a whole vibe over there. It's a whole thing. It's a whole sound that when I always talk about music, when I always talk about hip hop, we can't just focus on hip hop because everything that we've created over the years is still a thing in some part of the world, and we got to know that. And it's part of our cultural legacy to make sure we keep that out there. But I want to hear what some of y'all got to say. Eve, I see he's got up here to calls. Eve, what's on your heart? You got to say, Eve? I know you got something to say. Let's say something. And if you want to speak, or if you want to ask any questions, hit the request button.
Peace to the room. I don't really want to speak a lot tonight because my voice is shot, but I think my favorite contributor in the neo soul archive would be Lauryn Hill. I don't think she gets enough credit for her talent. I know people know that she's a singer, but she can rap, she can play instruments. I think that live aspect is always something that we should pay homage to. That ability to create when there's so many replicas out there. And if y'all could please tweet out the space, be much appreciated.
Yeah, thank you. Please tweet out of space. Please, please, please tweet out of space. What's up, Nikki? Um, yeah. So if you want to get up and speak or add what you have to say, feel free to hit the button, and we will bring you up on stage. Again, I'm not gonna be here all night because I got a concert to get to myself tonight. Hold on. But we got to pay homage and we got to acknowledge what got us here musically. And musically, see what went into neo soul saving. Again, I don't like to use the term neo soul. I use the term like I like the whole Soulquarian sound, but the Soulquarian was the sound of Electric Lady Studios, with the Roots, Erykah Badu, and that whole group, that whole crew. But again, neo soul, the term neo soul was created to other the sound. When the fact is that is the sound. There is no other. That is the sound. Like the others should be what we call pop music, what we call popular R&B. The At the time they were trying to kill us with Ashanti. No disrespect to Ashanti, but and then Ja Rule. Oh my God. What would I be without my baby? Music was getting horrible in the late 90s. R&B wise, oh my God, R&B was getting terrible. And you got the whole. I mean, that the late '90s R&B, early 2000s R&B is some of the least memorable music in music history. I mean, at least in the early '90s, we had SWV, we had TLC, Escape, we had Jodeci, Boys to Men. Even though mainstream R&B was starting to diverge in the '90s, and that's why that a lot of those sounds from the early '90s don't really keep up to date because they weren't using live instrumentation. I want to make something very clear. When I'm talking about the music, I'm not talking about the abilities of the singers and the producers. I'm talking about the tools that the producers and the singers used. The tools are trash and they were time stamped. So since the tools had a timestamp on it, the sound had a timestamp on it. When you use live drums, an electric bass guitar, an electric guitar, a piano, a keyboard, there's no timestamp on that. If a synthesizer is used in the way a synthesizer is supposed to be used, as long as you're not using the keyboard to play the horn and the string parts, use the keyboard to play keyboard licks. If you want some string parts, go out and get some live strings recorded. You want some horn parts, hire some horn players to play those parts. And if you do that, yes, it costs more money up front, but your music isn't time stamped. Erykah Badu wasn't the biggest artist of the late 90s. But Erykah Badu hasn't done an album in 12 years and she still tours and she sells out. I saw her at the Hollywood Bowl last year. She sold out 18,000 seats and then came right back to LA to Smoking Blues Festival that following March. And that festival had over 150,000 people there and she headlined it. She wasn't on the front of every magazine, on every TV commercial back then, but her music stayed true. Maxwell, when he toured, I saw him at the Hollywood Bowl 2 years ago. 18,000 seats. He was never as popular as Usher. He was never as genuine. All these people were more popular than Maxwell when he was on. But who's selling out 18,000 seat venues and who needs to go on old nigga tours with other old niggas that have used to, modern the music, the more fake sample sounds. We see it right now. We see it with what's going on with what's his name? Jill Scott. I'm buying tickets right now. She's gonna be at the Hollywood Bowl in May. Yes, them box seats was $500. And guess where the fuck I'm be sitting? Right there in them boxes. Because she put that tender love and care into her music. And that era is the era that these newer artists, when they want to find out, when the newer artists, the younger artists, when they want to go back 20 years, 25 years, the musicians, they're not going back to what would I be without my baby? They're not going back to that shit. They going back to the era, the small pocket where music was really done right, that saved music and preserved it for today. Oh shit, I just looked down, we got some people. Eve, whoever is next, Let them go.
Miss Giselle had an excellent point that she put in the comments, and then after that, it's going to be Boss Skrilla.
Okay, go ahead, Miss Giselle.
Hey, Dwayne. Yes. Thank you for hosting the space. You know, music is my thing. Now, with neo soul music, absolutely, it saved our music. And then when they saw, remember at that time, um, they was trying to minimize our groups, and
Yep.
they were trying to transition them to crossover artists. That was the biggest push during that time. So, in order to do that, they had to transition our artists from live instruments and force them into just instrumentals more so. So, stuff that they make on a a beat making machine. So, with like what happened, they were trying to, instead of like killing R&B, just like they did with country music, just like they did with jazz and every other genre of music. They pause our artists. Pause and starve is what I say. And then when they pause them, they stop them from being able to produce the music that everyone loves. Jill Scott talks about it all the time. It's like she's like, I gotta be in a creative space. I gotta have the type of music. My cousin actually wrote like the last album that she did. He wrote a lot of songs on that album. And it's like when you listen to the sounds, like the songs that he was dropping, this, they was doing everything with Jill Scott is live music. When you go to her shows, it's, you go and jam to it. But when you listen to everything else that they're pushing to the front line, it's all like that beat making machine. And it's no energy with it. I wanted to just say that that transition occurred because they wanted to take R&B, because you can hear it now being given to artists like Yeba, who I cannot stand the fact that that artist, she can sing, but she literally stole James Brown whole everything. And she gives props to Aretha Franklin. But the point is, this is like, stay out of our music. This isn't for you to do. That's how I feel about her. Um, but yeah, I can say more, but I'm gonna land. I don't want to drag.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Because you're right. Because and I always talk about this. The decline of R&B started back in the mid '70s when they started really implementing it, and it didn't start. We didn't start hearing it in the music until you got to the '80s. But it was in the mid '70s is when they put that file on Aretha Franklin, and they basically stifled Curtis Mayfield's career because Clive Davis and those guys, they didn't want R&B being militant. So by the mid '70s, you see the lyrics, the militancy started to get extracted little by little, but you didn't really notice it until you get to the '80s. The '80s is when everything became cheesy ass pop. And the '80s is cool, but that's when you start. The first thing they took out was the string arrangements, and then after the string arrangements, they took out the live horn arrangements. Then after that, they took out the live drums, and then this happened slowly from the late '70s to the early '80s, from the early '80s on, and then by the time you get to '88, '89, you no longer have a band at all. You get to New Jack Swing, and it's no more band at all, and it's just a computer in a box. Hell, even Freddie Jackson. Freddie Jackson's music, as good as it was, that was a drum machine. It wasn't a live drum set. And so you started to see that happen throughout the '80s. And in the '80s, there's so much good music that got left in the '80s because of these cheesy ass sounds. Think about Howard Hewitt. Howard Hewitt put out a bunch of good music in the '80s, but when was the last time you heard a Howard Hewitt song? Them songs, just like his Shag, is left in 1988 because you start to really use they start to really use those synthetic sounds so much of Gerald Levert's music, as great as he was. Look, you need a live band. Let me get to you, boss, in 1 second. You need that live band sound. You need that push pull, that give and take, that synergy between singer and artist, and between artist and band, singer and band. The synergy is what the is that whole is what makes the sound so grand and so rich and so full. That's why you can hear a big difference in Luther Vandross's career from 1980. Didn't you know that? I love that song. They got those Paul Reiser string arrangements on them. Real chilling sound to those string arrangements. And then you get to Luther Vandross in the 2000s. Dance with My Father was no less of a good music. Is this Luther Vandross still sounded as good, but the ingredients, the
The
instrumentation,
energy.
it wasn't the same. And and they had effectively killed off all live instrumentation by the time he gets to the early 90s. And then here comes neo soul. Mr. Zell, I heard you want to say something real quick. Go ahead.
No, I said it was the energy. They had to take away the energy. And then
Yeah,
they tried to transfer it over to their people. If you notice, when you talk about the transition, a lot of the problems came in the 90s because they incorporated television. So they used all like the radio, television, and then the radio and television to really push the initiatives. And we were magazine people. So we was looking at what was happening in the magazines.
yeah,
Everybody wasn't made for like the Mary J effect. Mary J was like a gem when it came to that hip hop soul, but everybody isn't hip hop soul. She created that genre that kind of walked us into this portion, and I think she was like, to me, I love Mary J, but it's like everybody else wasn't made for that sound or like that type of music.
exactly. She's the exact example that I use. When Real Love dropped, that showed the industry two things. Yes, she had soul, but you didn't have to have the greatest singer, and you didn't have to have a real production to the music. You could just make R&B a vamp. Dun 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 dun. You just vamp that the whole song. Now you got a song, and that's where it was going. That's where mainstream R&B still is, but neo soul saved it. Eve, and then I'm gonna get to Boss.
It's like transhumanism in music, like that manufactured sound. I
Yeah,
don't know. When Mr. Zell was talking about it, all I heard was transhumanism. Like they want to take us away and put the instruments in, and then now you don't need us anymore.
that's exactly what it is. Because the next genre is AI music. That's next. They've already started putting it out, but I guarantee by 2026, you're going to have a Grammy winner that's a completely AI. That's what they want to take it. But boss, go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. What messed it up for all the neo soul was gangster rap, video games, and crack. What it did was gangster rap brought in the negative stereotypes that they wanted to push out to the community, and they all got together behind the scenes, all the major labels, and said, "This is the message we want to push out into the community." It ran right along and corresponded with the crack that was destroying our community. So this is an attack, a straight attack, a war tactic that they ran on us. And the video games did something different as far as the instruments. Most of the people who had money, who were middle class, working, had a home, most of their kids had a basement. They played instruments in the basement. But when they got video games, they went from instruments to playing video games. Crack wiped out the ability to have the home. So we started moving into apartments and slums and different type of projects where we didn't have basements or space to play the instruments. So kids are playing video games, no instruments. Then they bring in the computers or the keyboards. So now other people who didn't have the rhythm or the soul that we possess, now they can just sample or just loop or just put the time stamp on it and become as creative because they steal from us. So now you got them gentrifying our music, our soul, and then they bring in their singers, starting to bring in their rappers. I'm in Louisville, Kentucky right now. I'm in the home of Muhammad Ali, and out of all the rappers we done had come up out of Louisville, Kentucky, our top rapper is a white boy that we raised, Jack Harlow. So yeah, they gentrifying everything and they're coming in. But we have an opportunity to take it back because all we have to do is stop purchasing that music, stop giving to that music. If we put our money where we want it to be at, then we don't have to worry about that. We can control this. And we can take ownerships of our own company. Like changing rap. Like we got a thing here. We're in Louisville.
I don't want to go too far off into that because we kind
Uh-huh.
of talking about different subject. different, slightly, because the
Okay.
hip hop thing is slightly different than what happened over here on the neo soul thing.
Well, that one thing that knocked the neo soul out. Like for
Well,
instance,
neo soul, no, no point. Neo soul isn't knocked out.
no,
It's
no, I'm saying it's what had hit it. Like for instance, the reason Erica Badu, the reason she sells and can still shut down because she is basically so hip hop. She got so much swag and she kicks that truth. She kicks the knowledge. That's pure hip hop. Hip hop came in kicking truth and
it's
knowledge.
not hip hop. It's not hip hop, sir. That's just black culture. Hip hop.
I
Remember, hip
understand.
hop is the baby. That's just black culture.
I
I'm saying that's
understand.
what I'm saying. I don't want to go too far into that
I understand.
because what I'm saying is neo soul is all I'm saying is it's just authentic soul music. There is no such thing as neo soul.
Okay.
It's
Well,
just soul music.
I
And
understand. With me being a hip hop artist, I bring everything from that angle. So I'm understanding where you at. I'm gonna go on and land my plane, and I'm gonna go on and be a listener and learn. All right.
I appreciate you, my brother. But thanks for speaking. I
Hey,
appreciate it.
peace and be one, family.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I like and I appreciate that brother. I'm not, I don't want to minimize anything that brother said because he did say some very valid stuff. I'm not here to minimize that at all. To be clear, um, but at the same time, the hip hop thing that was going on in the '80s, and that was more. I mean, the gangster rap thing was more so going on in the '80s, and really, what killed the instrumentation was more so them not putting with them taking our music out of the schools. We used to teach music in school, and I mean the school, and then when we had our own schools, we taught them there. Then we had integration, but at least in white schools up until the late '60s, early mid '70s, they taught instrumentation in school. So, black people, one thing about us, we're not going to stop making music. When it comes to us, we gonna make our damn music. And so, since they took the music out, we figured it out. We figured out how to do it on a computer. That had more to do with resource deprivation than anything else, and it also has a lot more to do with what went on with um, not just resources, but what went on with the music industry. The music industry stopped funding budgets for musicians to be paid because you got to look. I was just saying this now. The musicians from the '70s, those cats was in their 20s when they was hot. They were at the beginning of the beginnings of their career. If the music, if it is this isn't a us thing. This is what happened to our music because these are the people who bought when we did create our own record labels. They're the ones who bought the record labels and forced these record labels to sell by hook or by crook. We know who we dealing with. I want to always take it back to the primary problem, not the because usually what we deal with is the effect, the fallout. I'm going back to the cause. I'm going before the fallout. We going to the cause of this, the root, and what at the root of it, the industry in the '80s said we're not going to budget any more music. Black people, your music get played on that computer over there. That's how it happened. That wasn't a decision that we made. What happened was, I remember I said the story before when I talked to my father-in-law about what was going on in the '80s with the music. He was telling me about certain there was a certain producers that he knew. They're basically told, look, we're not going to give you the budget to produce with a live band, and if you don't use that drum machine over there, you're never going to produce again. You had people like Bootsy Collins in the '80s. I've heard so many stories of people like Bootsy and all these different great musicians standing out in front of the Motown building with their instruments, standing in front of Capitol Records, just trying to play to get a job, to get a recording session upstairs. But there were no more jobs to be had because the record label wasn't fucking with musicians. So when we're dealing with the neo soul era, Erica Badu was on Motown. She always said Motown, for the most part, left her alone. And when we're dealing with that whole Soulquarian sound, we're dealing with the Roots, Erica Badu, Common, those guys, Jill. They're all we're at Electric Lady Studios, basically playing instrumentation on each other's albums. And them cats in Philly, oh shit, I got Mickey up, but let me shut the fuck up. Mikael, you a Philly dude. You speak. You knowledgeable on this, brother. I want to hear you talk.
Thank you. Thank you. Great, great, great Dwan B. Great Queen. Justy, Queen Nikki. Yes, actually, true. I was born and raised in Philly and then moved to LA. Philly. I mean, as a kid, I played maybe 7 or 8 different instruments as well. And my dad, he played, he was an entrepreneur, a businessman, but on the side, he played guitar with a group called Frankie Beverly and Mays. That's when they were the Raw Souls.
So yeah.
So the thing about Philly,
So you there, brother?
any city in the country.
You went out
So
real
the
quick. Can you say
culture
that again?
is something that is very, very important to us in education. So reading music, understanding theory, harmony, composition, and so on and so forth was important. But what was more important was being deep, DEEP. So when we talk neo soul, what you're really hearing is what's in the water of Philly. A person wants to be the deepest or the best musician. If you wasn't great at your instrument, you'd be laughed at. Just like if you didn't know how to fight, you get laughed at. So I would say the genius and the visionary of neo soul were 2 people, more or less. Rich Nichols. Rich managed the Roots, and a few other artists, and Kedar Massenberg, who was at Motown at that time. The Roots formula, well, let's say it wasn't just the Roots, it was just the vibe. In terms of the groove, and now we're talking the rhythm, was displaced beats. So we were listening to a lot of J Dilla, Tribe, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But at the same time, the musicality had to be a mixture of jazz and soul, right? And with that bass sort of, just a few milliseconds off from the kick, right? And what we would do every Thursday, there was a place called the Black Lily. It was at the 5 spot. We would have this open mic thing. And a lot of the artists that you know today, Music Soul Child, Jazzy B and the Fat Nasties, and so on, the Jazzy Fat Nasties, and so on and so forth. A lot of the musicians would just show up there and just get on the mic. And that became the thing. That became part of the culture. But that was organized and led by the women, that were part of I would say, the Roots circle. And um, and the culture essentially caught on once Kedar Massenberg connected with the Roots, and they did a song that Jill was supposed to sing on, but because Jill wasn't as marketable then, they brought in Erica, and of course,
You got me.
uh,
You got me.
you got me exactly. But everyone in Philly knew that Jill was the one, and she was up next, right? So Jeff, at that point, started, his label, his production company, and took Jill under the wing and finished the album and brought in a lot of the local producers to work on her album. And then a different group of producers started working on music stuff. And then just this hub of producers was working on different artist projects because, we knew that we had an in with Motown, and of course the Roots was was already out. So at that point, we knew we had a vibe, and it was just really a matter of matter of time. And then a lot of the musicians that were on the road were coming to Philly for our musicians. Let's say the celebrities, the artists, Mary J, all of them, they were coming to Philly, to take our musicians on the road because Philly was the factory for the best musicians in the country. That's where you would go. You would either go to Philly or you would go to Oakland, right? So ultimately, you know, the main studio was a studio called Larry Gold's, right? And Larry was a string arranger, right? And he did play, with Philly International and a lot of the old stuff. So we were able to incorporate a lot of those lush string arrangements. I mean, we didn't have the 40 or 50 piece, orchestra, but we had enough strings, to simulate, that Philly sound on top of that um, misplaced Jay Dilla beats and that jazz R&B soul, musicality, and then and then of course, the five spot or the Black Lily, that became the vibe, right? And it just picked up, but it was very conscious. It was conscious because half of the time in the studio, would be spent just debate heavy shit, not fluff, not, ABC simple shit. I mean, the heaviest conversations. So, you know, in our studios, you could, just sit there and witness a debate between Mos Def, and Jay-Z. And we would always laugh regarding Jay-Z because he wasn't that heavy. In fact, Common wasn't that heavy. So that was always the test to see, I mean, it wasn't just the music, but we would have, the ciphers, and discussions, be it quantum mechanics, electric vehicles, whatever, right? But you had to be able to stand your ground and hold your shit, or you wasn't allowed in the cipher. In fact, there was a brother, he used to be with the Roots. I'm not going to say his name because it's embarrassing, but he was always in a debate and he didn't know shit. And Rich Nichols, the former manager of the Roots, um, uh, bought a demo into the studio, and he asked the guy, I'm not going to say his name, would you sign this artist? And the guy listened to the music and said, no, no, fuck no, he's weak, right? And then Rich was like, nigga, this is Donny Hathaway. And so,
Whoa.
right? And so, everybody in the room laughed. At that point, and I'll say his name, Dice Raw, he lost all credibility. You understand?
Uh-huh.
So you had to know your shit, and you were always being tested. But that consciousness and that level of intelligence, was transferred into the music. So you just didn't get, great technically skilled musicians. You got the whole vibe of Philly, plus the intelligentsia or the pseudo intelligentsia that Philly really represents, and that became, what we call soul, or what everyone else called neo soul. Um, and the reason why it wasn't sustained is because our budgets weren't high. Because if it was just you know we could just use a trumpet and a trombone, right? But the way the keyboard would accompany it, and maybe you add a cello and an alto flute with that, it sounds lush, right? But the studios at that time, they didn't want to keep spending the budgets for that. Plus, the music was too enlightening, and the culture of being intelligent, being sensible, or rational, being grounded was was something that especially our people were really thirsty for. But the industry was focused more or less on the money, on the commercial, what they thought would be.
I'm Mikhail. I'm so glad you brought that point up as far as orchestration goes, because this is the point that I always like to bring up when we're talking about music out of the '70s and why the '70s was the greatest era is because, like, we had our own labels, so we can make the music as lush as we wanted before they bought them out. And before I go any further, I have to say rest in peace, Thom Bell. He passed away today.
Right.
The great Philadelphia
Yep.
international
Arranger,
producer,
producer.
the arranger behind all those lush string arrangements, and there's a certain brotherhood and kinship in soul music between LA and Neo and Philadelphia that needs to be explored. Because like the same way we're talking about like neo soul now, the same thing with like things like disco. Disco had a polygenesis between LA and Philadelphia. Love Team over here in LA, the sound of Philadelphia over in Philly, dropping the same year. You know what I mean? Then you same thing with the neo soul thing. You know, my man, one of the people preserving that whole sound, one of the producers behind is my man J Mo, Jarvis Mosey. He's out of Long Beach, and he's putting together a neo soul documentary right now where he has a lot of music behind Erica Badu, Jill Scott, and Anthony Hamilton. He wrote "Give Me the Best of Me," and you know, there's a certain thing that you see what went on in Philly is similar to what happened over here in LA when the sound kept got getting preserved. It was the musician and the artist putting their stuff together, playing on each other's stuff because they only had shoestring budgets, so they couldn't go out and get a 64 piece string arrangement. They can't go out and get these top level, known guys that horn guys. But then what they did do with that whole sound was they not only incorporated the Philly sound, but you guys open up y'all doors to Roy Hargrove. You know what I mean? To bring his trumpet to the sound. You know what I mean? And it was just this whole soup of black soul that, like our brother Mikael just said, it really couldn't sustain itself because it didn't have the budget. When you're dealing with Adele, when you're dealing with Justin Timberlake, these white folks. When white people want to do R&B, they get a budget to do it however the hell they want to do it. But when we want to do it, all of a sudden, oh no, that string arrangement costs too much. Mickey almost got kicked off. Damn. Um, that string arrangement costs too much. That horn section costs too much. We get a whole bunch of, ooh, the money a little tight right now. Ooh, I don't, ooh, man, can you give me next week? That's what happens when it comes to our music, when it comes to our rhythm and blues sound. And going back, and I'm getting to you in 1 second, Eve. Rhythm and blues. This is rhythm and blues. Neo soul is not. That's the industry's term to other rhythm and blues. There is no other rhythm. Neo soul is rhythm and blues. That was a word that they tried to put on it to make it seem as if it was some derivative of music, when in fact was what we call it. Like I hate using the term neo soul, but I gotta use it because you want to use pejorative terms that people understand the most when you're grouping group forms of music. I get it. But when I say neo soul, always know that I'm speaking in the context of knowing that no, that's genuine rhythm and blues soul music. That's what it is. And it's no mistake that it happened in Philly,
Right.
the same area, same city as the sound of as Thom Bell and
Right.
Gamble and Huff.
Right.
It's no mistake that whole the live music sound is still being preserved in LA because rhythm and blues, and I'm putting together some works on this. Rhythm and blues' primary roots are in Los Angeles. 1945, the first rhythm and blues record labels that came out were all based in LA. And the majority of rhythm and blues labels, since the beginning of rhythm and blues, going back to 1945, has been based here. And that's because this has also been a place that playing music is very encouraged. We got to talk about the World Stage Theater over there in Leimert Park. You know, that the current crop of jazz musicians, Kamasi Washington, Terrence Martin, the people who are controlling jazz, come out of. But there's a certain
Right.
relationship and a kinship between Philly,
Right.
LA, Oakland, when it comes
Right.
Detroit. There's a certain brotherhood kinship between these cities.
Right. Well,
Comes to our
and that's a very excellent point. I'll tell you why. Because I knew Kenny Gamble as well as Tom Bell. It was the Motown thing. When Motown moved to L.A., that's really when you heard a sort of a shift of the sound, even though Philly was sort of monitoring. and maybe even to an extent emulating the Motown sound, I guess, in the 60s. But in Philly, when we were kids, our music teachers were the musicians who played in Philly International, the orchestra,
Uh,
you see. And they would take us
yeah.
into the studios, you see, into their sessions, right? And even me, I would, my music teacher, Richard Genovese, he was a bass trombone player. I would have him play on some of my stuff. So they were grooming us. But, music is mathematics, so most of us that were musicians, we were also in tech as well, or in tech now. Most computer scientists or computer programmers are also musicians because of the mathematics, right?
Yes.
So, but I guess the point I wanted to make was, um, Philly was very competitive, and we always had sort of a complex with regard to New York, right? Because we were sort of the stepchild, right? We weren't considered a machine until Clive Davis really stepped in and started doing
Uh-huh.
deals, right, with Kenny Gamble, Leon Huff, and of course that brought Philly International into play. But we were always, our thing was our work ethic. Even if you look at Will Smith, it's our work ethic. You know,
Uh-huh.
we have to practice 15 hours a day to be the best. That's what we're going to do. Because if you're not the best, you're going to be laughed at on the streets. You see. So yeah, but that's the
That church culture, man. I remember when I was on the drums, I would be so terrified of rocking that tempo or getting the intro wrong to a song.
right,
And to the point to where before rehearsal, I'm on my drum set practicing my ass off for rehearsal. Cause
right,
I ain't gonna be the one that
right.
messes intro. You might mess the intro up, but I ain't.
Right. And that's why when if you look at the musicians, like even, I mean, a lot of the musicians who back D'Angelo or even Erica, because most of Erica's stuff was cut in Philly and Larry Gold's. You look at the arrogance and how they carry themselves like jazz musicians.
Uh-huh.
And I remember in LA, the first studio I ever used was a man who was a mentor of mine named James Gatson. You're a drummer. You know who James is,
Yeah, I know what that is. Yeah, shit,
right?
yeah.
Right on Crenshaw, off Crenshaw. And so, James was cool. I was just, I was a kid basically, coming into
Crenshaw 40,
LA. Uh,
Crenshaw 43rd.
there you go.
I used
Exactly.
to I used to POTUS. I used to use that studio for my podcast. But
Oh
yeah,
yeah. Right.
the plaques is far, bro.
Yeah, 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 yeah. James, that's my guy. You
Yeah.
know, and yeah, he has cancer.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, you should check in on. But anyway,
Okay.
so he let me in my little group to, record. James, he liked me. But he will, always warn me about the music industry. Yeah, you gotta watch them punks. That's James Gatson, right? He's a little gangster. He used to wear Jerry curl wig cocked to the side and have two little pistols right on his hip, right? But James, you know, he was connected to the Wawa Watsons, the David T. Walkers, the Clarence McDonalds, all of them who he introduced me to that I had the pleasure of working with. And of course, they've taught me a lot, the Ray Parker Juniors and so on. So these, the, the, the gods, right?
And
And
those are the
so,
guys. You bunch
right.
of guys,
So,
right?
right. And this is the LA sound. So he let me use the studio. And it's like, that's like my chance to show off with the girls. And so we're in there literally fucking around. And I'm not playing my parts right. Gatson walks into the studio, literally, he's a Kansas City gangster, old nigga. He walks into the studio and we see him walk into really the sound room. I mean, yeah, the sound room. And he pushes the engineer out of the way, like pushes him out of the way, right? And he gets on a talk back and he says to me, well, he says to everybody in his James Gatson voice, all right, I don't fuck with punks, and left. right? So you
Yep.
know what that meant, right? And we were kids, we laughed and shit because we thought everything was funny, but we knew what he meant. What he was
Uh-huh.
saying was, if you're not the best, if you're not on top of your shit, don't come around here. I'm not going to introduce you to nobody. You're not going to be around here embarrassing, wasting my time. I'm paying for this engineer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right. So that's what you don't hear in the music today. You don't hear them old niggas calling these young ones and saying, okay, I ain't gonna fuck with these punks. You don't see a Tom Bell. You don't see Rich Nichols, who used to manage the Roots before he passed. You don't see a Kenny Gamble, Leon Huff, you know, pushing for excellence. And that's what
Uh-huh.
the black culture, that's what we represent, is a certain excellence that the world doesn't produce, especially
Mm-hmm.
the black world. And when you hear Neil Soul, you're hearing the excellence. And you're talking about, how starting your songs, and not coming in right. Our arrangements in terms of neo soul, what you call neo soul, what's called soul, to us, we used to study who was our favorite in terms of arrangements were mint condition,
Yes,
right?
sir.
So if you listen to a lot of our live stuff, right, that's sort of, that was it for us, mint condition, you know. So, we had a formula that worked, and it could have developed into a multi-trillion, I say multi-billion dollar industry. But I remember one time when Rich Nichols, the manager, he passed from the Roots, and we were talking uh, about the Roots, and he was sick, you know. And Rich never drove, so I was taking him home. The Roots, they did their picnic, Roots picnic, and he said, Mikhail, he said, I only want one thing for my guys, and that is that they all become rich, right? And he passed, and of course they got their show, Jimmy
Yeah.
Fallon, and they're paid, they're good, So the ethics, the seriousness, the reverence, for your craft was very, very, very important. The consciousness, the intelligence was very important. I remember Amir and I, we were going over a concept uh, called Music for Oil because, we said the music is our oil. That's our commodity, right? And I said, why don't we do X, Y, and Z? And I said this. And he looked at me and said, damn, how come I didn't think of it? I'm like, nigga, because you're not me. You know, so he was thinking to himself, he's a genius, right?
Yeah.
And he should have thought of it. But that, you see, that's the Philly mind. So you hear all that intelligence, in the arrangement, of Erica's Mama Gun, or even Lauryn Hill. That's my sister. Her first album, Miseducation, most of it was recorded in Philly.
Uh-huh.
People don't know that, you
It
see.
sounds like
Oh, yeah, of course.
it. I didn't know that tangibly, but when I hear nothing even matters at all between her and D'Angelo, that sounds like it was recorded in
Uh,
Philly. I mean,
uh,
everything about
all of
that
it. Some of it was the overdubs, some of it was done, of course, in New York and Jamaica, but the musicianship,
was in
you
Philly.
know, it's in Philly.
And
You
so,
know,
yeah, I want to thank you for bringing that context to the situation. To what I'm glad you joined this room, my brother. I wasn't do this on
thank you, dear
YouTube, but
brother.
I'm glad I did it on Twitter Spaces so you can join in and
Absolutely. Thank
give
you,
us
dear
that.
brother.
If you still got time to stick around, I'd like you to stick around. I just want to get to some other people that want to speak. If you got to
Absolutely,
go, I
brother.
get it. But if you don't mind sticking around, I would love to if you to stick around.
Thank you, dear brother. And I appreciate and I'm honored again to be on your red carpet and to walk through your velvet rope. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. Great fun. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Like, likewise, my brother. Likewise, Eve. I wanted to get to you. I know you had something to say. Then you get to whatever the hand, whoever's next.
I just wanted you to touch on Floetry. I feel like me personally, I heard the neo soul uh, categorization when Floetry started to pop in the late '90s. I don't know that uh, I was really hearing it like that. But then I know that they're not even from here, so
Yeah,
I
they're
don't
from.
know if that's related to that pop or what.
It is. Well, Floetry, they're out of England, but there's always been a sort of a connection between the soul music in America and England. You know, loose ends, they're from England. Rod Temperton is European. The white songwriter to I Want to Rock With You. And so Heatwave was half UK, half Ohio. You know, there's always been a certain sort of a bond between the what's going on over in the UK. So basically, let me just break it down. The things that got dubbed neo soul was just black people who did music with a live instrument and some background singers and who didn't whisper and say a bunch of bullshit. That it all kind of got grouped together. When truth is, Floetry, they're extending that lineage of soul music that the UK has produced for a long time. Black artists in the UK, they get it. And it's never a whole huge crop of them, but there's always consistently somebody, a group or a few groups from the UK that get the sound. Like Yasmin Lacey, I brought her up earlier. Yasmin Lacey, she's the one now out of the UK. She's a black woman, but she's from the UK, and they would dub her neo soul. We just got to know that these souls are just these titles are just general things, but Floetry was R&B. They were rhythm and blues. They were just rhythm and blues that wasn't plastic. And all radio play rhythm and blues in the '90s was super plastic. So if you weren't super plastic, you were dubbed neo soul. I know there's Clan Killer and Miss Giselle. I'm not sure which one was next.
It's
And
Clan Killer first, and then Miss
thanks,
Giselle.
thanks a lot, brothers and sisters, man. Great topic, brother Macau. Man, you're wonderful, brother. You're a history, and you're a great a representative of our people. I noticed, I'm from Detroit, but I noticed when, I went out to LA, Compton, and I spent some time out there, and I noticed that some of the Hispanics out there, they really took to Motown, everything which is black culture, from the dress. They call it, a lot of people call it zoot suits, but it's called drapes out of Detroit. If you can remember the movie Malcolm X,
Yep.
Detroit Red, when Malcolm went out there, he wore the zoot suit, and the cars, that's all from Detroit, and Motown from Detroit. They literally just copy the culture that was happening in Detroit, that was popping. A lot of brothers, my granddaddy, man, God bless his soul, he's gone now, he's 98 years old, man. When they used to get their cars, they would deck it out. I mean, from when they get from the factory. Matter of fact, I mean, they had plugs inside. They would get cars brand new out the lot, or brand new out of the factory, and they'd supply their whole crew with it. A lot of stories like that. But I also I've seen in Jamaicans, Motown, our black music influence. Most of them had the biggest part in influencing reggae and Jamaican artists out there. So I take great pride of our music, because that's a symbol of. I mean, that's like a pillar of who we are, and we had such a love, and we answered to one another too. That was another code that we had amongst us. I mean, this stuff that they putting out today, they don't answer to nobody. I mean, we had to answer to our seniors. We had to answer to other brothers. We more afraid of what our community was going to think than what white folks was going to think, right? And so, and our competition, we was competing against each other. And that just made us so much better, because no one else can touch us. No one else was doing it. I want to bring one other point. I've been hearing vibrations of is R&B dead? I seen a video about a month and a half ago, of some rappers attacking the R&B artists, right? And I feel I feel some type of way about that because I look at that as a direct attack on a main pillar of Black American culture, right? And so I'm hearing some of these rap guys, a lot of them, their background is not from the U.S. talking about R&B. R&B is 100% unadulterated with no other outside influences. It is a main pillar of Black American culture, and I don't like that.
You
I don't like that.
they ain't from here. That's why I said it. But I do want to give a little bit of pushback to something you said earlier. The Mexicans in LA, you remember we didn't have the internet back then.
Yeah.
They didn't know nothing about Detroit. They was copying the black people on the other side of the train tracks in LA.
Right.
And that's something we got to remember. Our culture is strong. And
Right.
one thing I would really like to pull back from is regionalizing a lot of what we do because it really happens. There's our culture is just strong and it goes all over the place. Like
Right.
because
Right.
car culture in LA, I realize LA. The reason why LA doesn't have a public transportation system that's good is because my grandparents told me this all the time. In the 50s, Ford, General Motors, Detroit came to LA and paid the city to pull up all of his train tracks during the late 40s. And they replaced it. That's why the first freeway in America is the 110 freeway here in LA. The first interchange is the 110 101, the first freeway interchange in America. Detroit came to LA and said they wanted LA to be a car city. So they paid to get all of the train tracks pulled up. And so that's why we go down Venice, Vermont, San Vicente, all of these streets that have a center median with grass. Those used to all be train lines. And so car culture came here. They manufactured, there was a General Motors plant in San Fernando Valley, the Firestone factory that made all of the Firestone tires for the West Coast in China was on Santa Fe and Firestone Boulevard. LA is major when it comes to car culture. So what you saw with the Mexicans out here, they saw what my dad was doing with the lowriders and freaking the lowriders out, and they would do their same thing on their side of the track. And they always played our music, not just Motown. Mexicans and keeping the drifters alive. They be playing Little Richard. The Mexicans be playing anything old. They fucks with War. Like now, like I remember Mexicans when I was in high school. They're like, man, you heard this band called War? I'm like, yeah, they're the Compton. My dad used to kick it with them. And then now my sister's a teacher, and she teaches at a mostly Mexican middle school. They be they the main ones listening to neo soul. Like my sister be listening to Erica Badu and Jill Scott, and she be
Right.
like, we just had this conversation last week. She be like, all the Mexican kids be knowing all the names to all the Erica Badu songs, all the Music Soul
Right.
songs, and it be the black kids that be like, who is that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's
And
the problem. We don't
and
be
and
preserving our culture, man. It's not that they take it, we leave it.
we leave it. We don't. We don't see the value of optimizing and leveraging it. And brother Clan, and thank you for your beautiful compliment. Now watch this. There's a genre, and it's like my favorite genre today called Afrofuturism. Right.
Okay.
That's just another reiteration of what you call neo soul. So when you listen to a Solange, for example, right, that's Afrofuturism, Black futurism, right? Anybody, you guys just Google Black futurism, the music genre. It's just neo soul or soul, right? And just food for thought. Janet's sound, I'm talking about when she transitioned from the Rhythm Nation, and then she had an album called Janet, and then the albums after that, right? That happened. The sound happened as a result. A friend of mine, manager, Quadri Alamin, was managing her at that time. He's Muslim. I'm Muslim, and we were working with Jermaine Jackson Jr., right? And we were giving him like the Philly thing, right? He gave our music to Jimmy and Terry, right? And also Jermaine, on his birthday, his aunt took him out, Jermaine Jr., Jai, to Fred Siegel's, and he left his music in her car. And so if you listen to Anytime, Any Place or the real sexy Velvet Rope stuff, right? That's the Philly vibe, the chord changes, the moods, the darkness. And you hear the young girls, that's singing today, that's the mood that they're on. So that musicianship hasn't been lost. It's just that Black futurism or alternative R&B today is not getting as much light. The girl Her, right? That's just a form of soul music from Philly. Jasmine Sullivan, who is from Philly, right? And she was a kid when we were back in Philly, right? But she was still doing Black Lily and so on and so forth. But she was always strong. And I mentioned Solange. Solange was mentored by my brother Tip. Come on, Q-Tip.
Yeah, and
That's why she's different. Yeah, that's why she's different from Beyonce. But she is Beyonce's muse.
she is. She's the artist that Beyonce wants to be.
Exactly. She's Beyonce's muse. You see, and Solange spent a lot of time in Philly. So
Like
it's
go back to that brotherhood between Philly, like Jasmine Sullivan out of Philly, but she
yep,
won her first Grammy with my man J Mo out of Long Beach, because
right. Because yeah,
it's
yeah,
just
the machine is in LA. Look, my brothers who we've done some things quietly with. The number one producers in the game is 1500 or nothing.
mm-hmm. And not only the machine. I mean, deeper than the machine, the musicians. There's a
1500
whole
or nothing. 1500 or nothing. They're in LA. All
the
the hot shit that you're
15
hearing, that's
they
1500 or
they
nothing.
hot, but also like just I mean more so just on the musicians level.
1500 or nothing. Because 1500 or nothing is a collection of like 30, 40 musicians, and most of them come out of church. Right. So when you hear all that Bruno Mars shit, all that other stuff, that's 1500 or nothing.
Yeah, you have
They're
them.
in LA.
I'm saying
They're
you
in
have.
LA.
I'm saying you have 1500 nothing, but there are other. I'm saying there are other musicians outside that circle too
Right.
that
Yeah.
that are here because there was in Lamert Park. There was always there's always been a vein to keep live musicianship alive in Lamert Park
Right. Right.
over at
Lamert
Jordan
Park.
High
Yep.
School.
Yeah.
There's
Jordan.
always been
Hmm.
particular high schools, particular, although rare, but these small pockets
Right.
produce so many dope musicians.
A lot of
And
those kids, well, a lot of those kids, Juan, are part of 1500 and
yeah,
nothing. That's what I'm saying.
yeah. And so that's just one of those things where it's just this whole this synergy and this vibe that goes on between between the different cities, and I think that's what really makes the music lush when you have these people who have Dallas. I'm always giving credit to Dallas and what they produce musically, um with that whole RC and the Grits flavor, that whole that Roy Hargrove, that Dallas, Ohio. I'm looking for Ohio to come back. Like, where is Ohio right? I'm gonna get to you, Mr. Zell. I got a question. Where is Ohio right now? I think we need Ohio musically because they've given us so much, but we don't. Where are they right now? I don't know.
Yeah, that's for a lot of places, though, brother. I mean, there's a lot of other things that's consuming people time, and a lot of it, man, too, is start with these high schools. A lot of these high schools they're getting rid of band. You know what I'm
They
saying?
big
So
government man. That was that ship sailed 35 years ago. What I'm
yeah,
saying is it's pockets because we've always had churches and we've always had pockets in these different cities. Like what
yeah,
Mikael's bringing out, there were these pockets that filtered music. Like here in LA, we have a thing called R&B Live that's not no longer around. But it was, you know what I mean? It was because we as Black people, they put the poison in the water of our music 40 years ago.
right.
We've
But
always had these spaces. But before I even go that further, Mr. Zell, you've had your hand up. I'm rude. Go ahead, Mr. Zell said you guys. You've had your hand up for a while. I
No,
don't want to skip past you.
no, I'm good, y'all. I was enjoying the conversation, but I can add just a couple of things just to put some context to what's happening and understanding why things are transitioning the way that it is. Understanding all of this has to do with us like actually getting to that point of like zero wealth. They mapped this shit out. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So if you really go through this, why did they attack the music industry? One, you look back in history. And when you look at history, you know that the civil rights era actually funded all, if not almost everything in the musicians funded the civil rights era. They funded all of the marches, and it was the elders in the community, making the food, housing the people. It was the people in the middle age that was out there hitting the streets. They had the younger the youth out of high school, that that age range, that was doing the sit-ins. Then you had the youth, the kids, they were walking into the schools and stuff like that. So they saw the power of our musicians and how influential and how much we respected our artists. So this is why they had to get behind the artists. And those who didn't assimilate, they just broke them. And if they couldn't break them, they killed them off and they said they overdosed somewhere. And we know that's a fact.
Right.
Now, and then, all right, so that's just with that. So, all right, so why would they do this? First of all, they want to steal everything from us. And the goal, ultimate goal, when it comes to like the zero wealth move, is once you're there, all you can do is like pay for shelter. And all you can do is try to figure out what you can do for shelter and safety. That's where they want us to get mentally. So how do you get us to that point? You take away who would fund. That's why they hit a lot of people that's in the music industry. It's a lot of starving artists right now. People that you see on TV look like they got money. They do not have money. I know this for a fact. Like I have relatives that were in the industry. Like, I had an uncle who played for the Manhattans forever, as well as other people who write on the background, people who are rappers, relatives who are in those spaces. And like a lot of these people don't have anything, and they got to keep your funds minimized, and they also have to control what you put out so that you're not as influential as those artists back in the day. So and as for the LA thing, why there's a tie with all of the artists, that's because it's a thing around the country. If you want to make it in the music industry, you got to go to LA. That's why if you look on the streets of LA, you got a whole bunch of starving artists out there with guitars and everything with a cup. A lot of the artists are homeless. But they
Gotta
go
push
to
back on that. I'm gonna push back on that, right?
you can. I seen the beaches down there.
No, people with the cups are the people that move here.
Yeah, no, you got some people that do want to move there. That is
But
a fact.
also, like when I was talking about the musicians and that, the ones that I'm speaking on
Mhm.
are the homegrowns. The ones I went to high
Okay.
school.
All right, cool. Now that's different. Now,
Yeah.
but a lot of the artists, just even over here, like with music, when I wanted to get into music back in the days, I had to. They was like, you got to be in LA for something like this, or Chicago. Chicago is known for like their gospel music and house music. But all of us, something else that you said earlier, it was about the sounds. All of us, we have so many sounds across this country, but it's over. Like we go to the area, we respect it, and it's almost expected to hear the sound. And like we kind of want to go and hear and see what it's about, and we enjoy each other's culture. Like in LA, y'all know for your gangster rap and stuff like that. You got DC for go-go trap, Atlanta, like Mississippi blues, New Orleans, like jazz music, Chicago house and gospel music, New York hip hop, Baltimore club. It's so many different sounds. And this is what they wanted to get behind because our music is so lucrative and it's endless. So if they know we can still we're creating this stuff, they're like, all right, they created enough. See, every time they think that we've created enough, they try to, like, they're like, all right, we can stop them here. But then we come out popping with some new stuff. You saw that with, and I don't want to say, I don't care, I don't know what anybody believes or anything, but when R. Kelly had that music that was dropping,
Mm-hmm.
uh, he actually reignited the Steppers groove. He actually started two. reignited the steppers groove, and it's people across the country that's getting back into stepping again. Then not only did he do that, he went back to like the storybook music songs, so people would listen. It's like a part two, it's a part three, like did you see part three and part four? So he kind of gave that, he created a new line of music, and it kind of like stopped him. And then you'll see it's gonna come back out, because usually they'll let it go off for like a decade. They don't want it to die too far off, and then they'll give it to a white artist. But the last thing that I wanted to say was point out what happened, because we're talking about, back to your point with the 90s neo soul music. Now, it was a couple of things that happened in the 90s, and what they had to do was neutralize like the way our vibes went, how we like, the music that we're attracted to. So the first thing they attacked at our youth, it was like 1990 was Kids Bop, and they had white kids singing more like the hip hop pop music. And then Nickelodeon took over like the group songs and all of that type of stuff. Like the whole idea of harmonies and group songs, that's our, they extended our stuff and they put it in there, and they put a whole bunch of white people with it. Then when those youth grew up, they were attracted to that music. Our kids were also, but it's like the sound kind of went to white kids. They were attracted to it because they were fed it so that they can produce it. That's all
Mm-hmm.
that is. And that's why today, these other kids, they know that other music because they're attracted to that music because of how powerful it is. And
Mm-hmm.
our kids, they were neutralized. And like the other dude said, the video games definitely help, because the hip hop that they play from this modern day music is what they want them to listen to while they playing the basketball games and stuff like that. So they use a lot of tools all at once, and they're doing it all without music. So I'm gonna land with that.
Yeah, I appreciate that for that. You know, video games have to play, but we also got to remember this: we can't, we don't want to get too far off from what these things did, like what happened. The musician, the musician, and can survive video games and music. If we can still have video games if the kids are getting live instruments, you dig what I'm saying? They It was almost you know we kids can do both, because I know me, I was heavy. I'm that generation. That's probably why I'm pushing back. Man, man, shit. Every video game when I was teaching myself how to play the drums, shit. Matter of fact, I was just playing Madden right before I came on here, knocking somebody out in that game.
Yeah,
The,
but you already had the roots though,
no,
doing.
no, no. I had the video games first. I had the video. That's what I'm saying. I
You
had my
had no
super.
soul music in your house before you had the video games.
I had Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis. Before that, I had the Atari.
And
Before
the music wasn't in there though. Remember, Dwayne, they didn't have the music like that in there. I
they
played
had
those games too.
they had that terrible, horrible video game music.
Exactly. So exactly. So you weren't at the point of the impressionable age.
See, no,
See,
no.
they got our kids when they were more impressionable. These kids start playing these games at
This,
6.
this is here's the reason I'm pushing back, because one thing we got to stop as Black people is the generational thing. Here's the reason I'm pushing back so hard at that, because I'm 41. All the good music that I speak on was all created before I was born. You know what I mean? I wasn't. This whole music thing was supposed to get me. They were pushing that nonsense to me. It's the people who. But the difference was, I was a musician at heart. If a drum machine was pushed in my way, in my face first, then I would have gone for the drum machine. I went to the drum set because when being raised in church, you see the drums all the time, and the drums were in my heart
You
more so
had the
in
root.
church.
You had
The
the root.
drums were in my heart, and like the best bass player in the world right now is Thundercat. He's the best bass player in the world right now. He has his own genre of music we call acid jazz. And when you talk about a video game head, somebody that can spend 10 hours a day playing video games, we're talking about the best bass player on the planet. So that's why I want to stay focused on, like, really, it's what was given to us and what we were allowed to play. Like our brother Mikael said, you have to, because music has always been done by a few musicians. It's never been a whole, even though music was all around. Well, I look at the recording industry of the 70s and the 80s. When you look at the musicians, it's the same musicians playing your disco songs, your funk songs. Then they'll have a country western station. They'll have a country western recording at 7 in the morning at the Capitol building, and then at 10 they got a recording for hard rock, and then at 12 they got a recording, a session for funk, and then at 5 o'clock they have another session for disco. It's when you look at the credits. I saw Greg Games this past Friday at the he was there with Corey Henry. Greg Games is the most recorded artist of all time. A lot of your music is Greg Games, like background singers, the Adantes. They sang on over 20,000 songs. It's always been these circles, and every city has this circle of about 4 or 5 drummers, 4 or 5 bass players, about 15 horn players. And those are the people that's producing the sound for everybody. You dig what I'm saying? And the people who have that thing in their heart, that particular thing, a video game can't stop it. Like that thing, that supersedes any other distraction because that's something you're born with. What we and our brother Mikael trying to say is those people with that thing, God still produces them. But when it comes time now to get to record a song, no, you don't get the job. We're not going to give you the budget. We're going to give the budget to that less talented person over there that's going to make the money on a computer, the music on the computer. It's about what they give. And I don't want to push because it is a video games are a problem in certain ways, but I don't see because the baddest musicians I know are some dope ass video game players. I
That's
promise you.
because it's strategy. You
I,
guys and church. Don't forget church
oh yeah, church.
influence. And a lot of
Church is
people
the
don't do
influence.
that. Like a lot of these
Yeah,
kids aren't there no more.
yeah. The church. I mean, that right there, I see is where a major issue is going on with our music. We ain't in church the way we used to be. You dig what I'm saying?
Right. And
Because
you're gonna
church is
do
where
it
is that
correct.
proving ground. I think you're on mute.
Oh yeah, no, I was just in agreement with you. You're gonna do, or you're gonna like you idolize and you start looking at and trying to be like what you're around. So your environment, that environmental influence changes things. Like, and for music, I know when these kids get these machines, or like when they get a keyboard, like some of these kids teach themselves. I have a cousin, my little cousin Tuki. He's a pastor right now. This dude taught himself how to play the piano. He would sit outside and he would just play these runs. All of these, like he would just kill it outside. Then the next
Uh-huh.
thing we knew, he was playing in the church. He just was doing it himself, 6 years old, rock it
Right,
out.
right. And that's the thing. Even in Philly, those musicians that you will hear on the records, every Sunday they'd be in church if they weren't on the road. They'd be in church.
Amen.
But I just wanted to interject something very important, brother Juan. You mentioned uh what's damn what's them 2 girls came from England? I forget. Damn,
Poetry,
Floetry.
poetry.
Right. So that's when things started going left for us because, of course, the tether thing. You know,
Uh-huh.
um, and then you heard the Justin Timberlake. That uh, brings what Sexy Back album that was done in Philly, right? All those tethers, the Josh Stones, all of them, they would start to come to Philly. Even Alicia Keys' album. I mean, a lot of that was done in Philly, and she would come and do the open mic. So Philly became the hub for artists who weren't authentically soulful, right? And we began to sort of lose hold over a grasp of the Philly machine, right?
Uh-huh.
and it was outsourced to different tethers. So all they knew was that, okay, if you listen to our sisters, if you hear them sing, with the exception of Lauren, right, they were trying to sing like Billie Holiday, right? But not even Billie Holiday, because if you listen to Jill and Erica sing, of course, Erica came from Texas. They would, sometimes they would even do the Diana Ross lady sing the blues version of Billie Holiday when they would sing. But these tethers that would come to Philly to record, and most of that was done at Larry Gold's studio, they didn't have the authentic understanding of our culture, of our pain, of what we were referencing. Our girls on the corner slap boxing with us. All that shit was part of the sound. The church. I didn't go to church, but that was, all that element. And neo soul, people don't know it. The genre you call neo soul was driven by black females. They were the ones who were managing it and really pushing it. And our biggest stars, with regard to, with the exception of D'Angelo and Maxwell, who just joined, and he's a tether. Um, you know,
Me.
were driven by the women. Jill, Erica, and Lauren. Period. You see, well, all the back stuff that you didn't see, all the managerial stuff, all the administrative stuff that was happening, that was the black women, mainly Philly, running that shit, keeping it alive. You go to the Black Lily on Thursday, it was the black women running that shit. They were, controlling the mics, right? They were the MCs, right? They were the ones you see on the door, letting you in if they knew you, or et cetera. They were the ones. You see, so people didn't know that either. That neo soul was primarily driven by black women. The vision came from a black man, Rich Nichols, the Roots manager. But it was the women who made that shit pop.
I'm glad you said that, Mikael, because that goes into a larger point that I'm always trying to make. Our stuff pops when there's a fusion between man and woman. When
Right,
there's a between our regions, when we're communal people. We've been so segregated and sectioned off. When a black man does something, oh look at the men. When a woman does something, oh look at the women. When we
right,
look at the whole picture, it's like Barry Gordy created Motown,
right,
but the money from Motown came from the savings from the pot that his mother created amongst family, that the
right,
loan that they had together, and
right,
Barry Gordy in turn made the first woman running any kind of major thing in music. Basically, the head of the company, a woman. You know what I mean?
right.
We've
And to
always
your
had
point,
this synergy between us that they try to come in and divide like it's like it ain't happening. Go ahead, brother.
right, to build on your point, great one, it's always the men who come up with the vision, but it's the women who sustain that shit.
And
His
execute it.
if it wasn't for Riona, this is Kerry Gordy's mother, there would be no Motown. She ran that shit. She was the one who knew how to read music, right?
Yeah.
And then it was the women, his sisters, the Gordys, that was running that shit. I know the Gordys,
Yeah.
right? And they're strong. They don't play. It was the women who made that shit sustainable. You understand? So people don't know that. It's us, the men, who come up, who create the vision, but it's the women who manage that shit and make sure. And they're anal. Our black women, they're anal about making
Yeah.
sure shit is tight. They don't fuck around when it comes to that. It has to be perfect. But it's us who create the vision.
Yep.
Tariq Nasheed, our brother. You don't you There are women who you don't even see behind the scenes that's running that shit.
Uh-huh.
You understand? But he
Uh-huh.
was the visionary. It's our black women that make sure things are tight.
Yep.
Period.
Yep. Yep. And so I'm glad you said that because it really is the synergy between the two that makes it pop off. And
Right.
we have to get back to that as a people, to knowing, and then as men knowing that our women are more than sex tools, and our women knowing that
Right.
men are more than ATMs, and
Right. The white man knows that. That's why he takes our black women to make sure his shit runs tight. He's not going after his women.
nope.
They know
So
that.
yeah, I appreciate that, Miss Giselle. I see you got your hand back up.
They know.
Yup, just to add,
Suzanne DePass, she kicked ass.
I think I'm Caesar the past. She did.
Gladys Knight.
She did.
Gladys Knight.
That's who's not
Gla-
thinking of.
Gladys Knight discovered the Jacksons and took and called Suzanne DePass the black women.
Yep.
But it was Joe
Let
who
me
had
get
the
to.
vision.
I think Matrix. Let me let me get to Miss Giselle. I see you had your hand up real quick. Go ahead, Miss Giselle.
yeah, it's just two things. I want us to also remember the influence that, like, we had a transition with our youth also. In the 80s, we had a lot of our youth who were musicians who went into colleges. A lot of our youth were going into HBCUs, right? However, that changed. A lot of our children started getting like directed to these white institutions. And we have to remember that HBCU experience, like that band experience, extended that musical experience. It pulled us in closer during that time. And even now, like when we hear HBCU bands, but now that these schools are like being flooded with like other people, we're losing that also. You look at a lot of the cultural things that helped us to maintain what we deem as Black American, foundational Black American culture, Freedman culture. You can see that um, a lot of it is being like manipulated and it's being changed into these other people. They're inserting their culture and
Of
then they're
course.
claiming it. Exactly. And the last thing that I wanted to say was neo soul artists, they did not want to be called neo soul artists
Hell
back in the
no.
day. Let's keep that a buck. We that's one thing Jill was like, I'm an artist. Erica will tell you that shit. That's why she said, I'm an artist and I'm sensitive about my shit. That's why she said it that way. Because she was tired of them trying to put her in a box. And it was like the neo soul box that was so vast, but they minimized it. We got to remember during that time, even though we knew how powerful it was, they minimized the neo soul box, and they had to even fight for like a award, like to get an award in the they was blocking them out of that the awards
Yeah, they
in
would
the
have.
shows.
I remember they would have Jill Scott should have at least 15 more Grammys, but they would have her in the same category as Destiny's Child. Like what the fuck?
That's what we were
But that
saying, and
that
it
was
was
by
like
design.
you cannot
Yeah, of course,
exactly.
of course.
That
You
was
can't
by design.
compare apples to oranges. You
If
just
you
can't.
remember when Jill, now watch the game, watch the template. When Jill, NDRE, and Alicia Keys did Oprah Winfrey, right? Oprah made sure that Alicia had the spotlight, even though Jill was the star. But
Uh-huh.
that was a deal that Oprah cut with Clive Davis.
They really did
You
push
understand?
Alicia on us real hard. That era right
There
there.
you go.
I
But
always
Jill
thought
was the star.
out of that
Jill
era,
outclassed everybody.
I remember when
Huh?
that era hit, Michael. I remember when Alicia Keys got started winning all these Grammys, and she was getting all the radio play, and I was thinking, out of all the sounds of the women out right now, yeah, even you could throw Lucy Pearl when they had that project together with Dawn and that
Right.
whole era. That Alicia Keys and John Legend were the two. Oh, I thought John Legend was an imitation of Carl Thomas.
Say it
Those
again.
He's
Say it
mediocre.
again,
He
Dwayne.
has he has about a 5 note range. He's mediocre, but even him, he latched on to that
He
neo
was the
soul thing.
male Alicia Keys. They
He only had
Right.
like three hits. Three hits.
Michael, you just
He had
you just open up a vein because it was a cloud I had in my head. You just opened up a vein of thought for me, my brother. I gotta thank you for that because what basically happened was they basically made radio play R&B classic fully by the late 90s. So you got this neo soul, what they label as neo soul, what we know is just traditional R&B. But you get what they label neo soul. It's coming, it's coming, it's coming. Now here comes John Legend on the male side of the game and Alicia Keys on the female side of the game. Both talented. I'm not taking nothing from them. But compare, you put John Legend musically next to Music Soul Child, no competition in it. Put it next to D'Angelo, lyrically and vocally, no competition. You put Alicia Keys next to Erykah Badu, Jill Scott, and that whole sound, it was just musically they were on another level. But John Legend and Alicia Keys, they saw that black people wanted this soulful sound, so they said, "Okay, here you go." That's what it seems like.
Right. Right. Well, what happened, and that's an excellent point there, brother, because again, the black woman, Angie Stone,
That the
beast,
goddess,
beast, right? Now
yes,
she's the one who really got D'Angelo on his
yeah,
presentation game, and and she's no joke, right? And she brought him from Virginia, of course, to Kadar Massenburg, right? And Kadar was really the focal point of Motown at that particular time, right?
mm-hmm.
So Alicia and John, so-called legend, they were part of the machine.
So-called
Remember it,
legend.
right? 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 Well, and and him, John Legend, so-called, he was working with Will I Am, who was part of the Interscope machine. Okay, follow me, right? And of course, Alicia was part of the Arista, well, let's say the J Record machine with Clive, right? Neither one of them were as talented as the ones that you mentioned, but they were part of the machine,
Yeah,
you see. And that's how they won.
yeah. You always got to look back to that common denominator, Clive Davis. All right, certain people I like to keep an eye out on when it comes to music. Clive Davis, Jimmy Iovine, where y'all come from? You know what I mean? Where y'all come from for real, for real? And why y'all so involved and you ain't never picked up an instrument? What makes you so important? We gotta ask these questions. You know what I mean? But Clan Kid, I see you got your hand up.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I can answer that. It's about control, man. These people have 25-year plans out,
Oh yeah.
and when they see a trend, something that's powerful, they get ahead of it. So that's the first thing. I want to also give a big shout out to the Queen of Soul, Aretha Franklin. She's done a whole lot for the music, for soul, neo soul, for soul. And also, I want to bring to you guys' attention. I put 2 videos up. I couldn't put it up on a jumbotron. I don't know how to do that, man. I'm still new to this thing. But these are Black American kids band. Cut 2 videos. They're Black American in the Detroit area. It's like 6 bands there, and two of the kids are my son and daughter. I got my daughter playing the flute and the trumpet. My son playing drums and saxophone. So you guys should check that out. That was something real cool and something real encouraging too, to see that and these are junior high. It's not high school; they're junior high. So that's that's a cool thing. I thought you guys may like.
I appreciate that, man. Thank you. I'm about to end this room because again, I'm going to go see PJ Morton and Alex Ozzy in about an hour
Yes, PJ
downtown.
Morton, that's my love. I love him.
Yeah, that brother got some soul. Corey Henry, he's probably my favorite. I saw him last week. Hopefully he comes to the show. But like, yeah, we still got R&B is not dead. R&B is alive and well. R&B is strong. It's as strong. It ain't gonna. I don't think no music could ever be as strong as it was in the '70s, but it's strong, and it'll get back to that. It can't get back to that point when we get to the point to where we get back and focus on our music. Black people got to know that it's not just hip hop. They try to put us in this box as if all that. The reason why do you think these white supremacists are going so hard talking about hip hop 50 and look at
Right,
these things? They going so hard because they want to make it seem as if the only thing black people ever created was hip hop. When we got to understand that
right,
hip hop is a child of everything that comes before it. Hip hop
right,
is people always put it on the MC or MC this Jay Z blah 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 blah. We got to remember this. It's about the music. If it was about the lyricist and the rapper, poetry would be just as popular as rap. It ain't about the lyrics, it's about the music. And hip hop stands on the shoulders of soul music, R&B music.
Right.
And we got
Absolutely.
all this music that's played around the world, from K-pop to all these different sounds. That's all Black American music. And if we stay focused on only hip hop, like, and no disrespect to the brother who spoke earlier, he's speaking from a hip hop perspective, and that's why I started having these kind of discussions and these kind of talks, because when we speak from a hip hop perspective, that's like walking in your own house through the back door. You don't walk in your own house through the back door and put it off to the side. You walk in through the front door. And hip hop, you got
Mm,
to know that hip hop is a side of what we do. But
right.
what we do go deeper. And I'm gonna get to y'all. I want to hear what y'all got to say before I close it out. But what we do goes deeper than hip hop, and hip hop pulls from everything before it. If we teach the next generation that it's all about hip hop, they're not going to have anything to pull from, because
Mm,
hip hop pulls from the soul. And if we
mm,
want our next generations of musicians and artists to pull from, when we point them in the direction of where they need to be pulling from, they got to go back before hip hop, and they got to go outside of hip hop, because the music is created
mm,
by the musicians and the artists. And that's why Kendrick was so good out here in LA, because you got the jazz musicians, Kamasi
right.
Washington, that are putting into the sound. It always comes back to the music. But I want to hear what Mr. Zell and Mikael got to say before I close. I'm going to Mr. Zell first, and then I'm going to get to you, Mikael, last.
All
Absolutely.
right. Yeah. So, and I appreciate you, Dwayne. You know, this is a laid back space, so you are appreciated for hosting, and you too, Just Eve. Now, I wanted to just say, as we move into the 50-year anniversary of hip hop, we know that hip hop is the child of all of these music, but you
Mm,
also have to look at how your enemy works. Your enemy goes in to conquer you, and they place their flag in our space, you know, because Black America is a country within a country. In our space, they place a flag. So when you look in our music with jazz, they used to call it jackass music. Now Kenny G's the king of jazz. You got Elvis, the king of rock. Even though that's our music. So you got to know they planted their flags in jazz music, country music, blues music, and like as you were saying, how if you notice with the music, they're placing their flag quietly in R&B, because a lot of us still rock with R&B, right? So with hip hop, it's not to conquer or to make kids only think that this is all that we have. To conquer hip hop is to conquer anything else to come going forward, because that's the child of all of these music. So if you kill the child, how is anything else going to be birthed out of it? So we got to look at this as war. And that's, I mean, in every area, they're doing this. So music is one of our most lucrative that has come out of America besides our other inventions. This has been lucrative that we have been able to own. But they've taken the name from so many of our genres, even though we know, a lot of people really don't know. And they've created it so that our youth don't know unless we have told them. So we have to push hard to make sure that they know who owns hip hop. And then going into 2023, the year the big take back, we need to make it loud and clear what's ours. And that's our music, our inventions, and every damn thing else. So I'm gonna land by saying the revolution continues.
And I, and I agree with that. They must know that we own hip hop, but I take it a step further. They must know that we own music. I mean, they got to know we own hip hop, but they got to know that we own the Black American child. Mikael, and I know you're going to test this, my brother. They have to know the foundational Black American child that we own music. And wherever our music goes around the world, and wherever part of the world our music touches, it changes their music and their culture. It ain't nothing that we change culture without. See, the white man got to change your culture through a gun and through a Bible. We change your culture through a C note and a G flat. That's how we change culture, and we got to know that we're that powerful. And yes, we own hip hop, But yes, we own K-pop too, little Timmy. Yes, we own country western too, little Johnny. Yes, we own EDM too, little Daquan. Yes, we own heavy metal, acid rock. We own that too, Shantae and Shaniqua. Yes, we do. They want to criticize you for having a three-syllable LaShante name. Well, shit, they better praise your black ass for giving them the music that they love the most. Because when they play their music, they don't fuck with it. But when they play our music, all of a sudden, cultural revolution. So again, I talked to my sister. My sister, we just was having this conversation. Her Mexican students and how her Mexican students, all they know is Lauryn Hill. The girls, Lauryn Hill, Erykah Badu, Music Soul Child. The boys, hip hop. You know what I mean? It's funny, crazy too, because when I was at a concert last week with Kamasi and Terrace Martin. And, I was with, I don't know if y'all know, y'all should know who BJ the Chicago Kid is. That's my dog right there. Nothing but love for him. Hopefully his baby just came. And when I talked to him, he just like, I've got a baby on the way. I was so happy to hear that. But BJ the Chicago Kid, we outside talking after the show. And it was the Mexican kids that was running up and knew who he was. And I was just looking like, man, it was these Mexican kids just flooding him. And they were like, man, you mean so much to me. And the black ones was walking by as if this wasn't BJ the Chicago Kid. So we got to pass that music down. They only know because their parents play it. So my question is, what were these black parents playing for them not to know? Michael, I was spending some time. I want you to get back up in here, Michael. Go ahead, my brother.
Thank you, great one. This is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful space, and I just want to land with this a song that my sister Lauryn Hill did, and most of you are probably not familiar with this song called "The World Is a Hustle." And you know, Lauryn, she caught hell with this industry, and every time I see her, I always tell her how much I love this song, and you know, but it's a song she never released. And I'll just read a verse of it, but you should Google or YouTube the song, The World is Hustle. She says, of the world spun by evil men with lies, only programmed to agree with what we see before our eyes, running after status quo on a television show. Just a picture perfect life is the only life we know. And this uncomfortable reality got me chasing fallacy. And the pace to pace is killing me. But I so willingly practice sin, just like it's my friend, when the whole world is a hustle. That's the first verse. You guys should listen to that song. She sums up the entire music industry and really this white power structure that we call white supremacy. But that was her blessing and her curse, her brilliance. And she epitomizes foundational Black American excellence. And when you have that level of excellence, those who have an agenda, their goal is to either exploit your excellence or to extinguish your fire. So I'll land with that. Love you. Thank you, dear brother, for the opportunity to speak. And I really appreciate you.
And I appreciate you too, man, because I couldn't have pictured this any better. You coming in with that neo soul perspective. Again, for those listening, we only use the term neo soul because that can get you right to the group of artists we're talking about. But when we're using the word neo soul, we're using that with the full understanding that neo soul era is just R&B done right. Rhythm and blues has a way it should be done. It has a formula that has worked since it. Oh shit! I'm gonna hit my mute button. It has a formula that's been around since it became a thing in the 40s, and that's live instrumentation. And it got neo rhythm and blues hit its zenith in the 60s and the 70s when it had the formula of live vocals, live drums, live strings, live horns. The four elements of the universe: earth, air, water, and fire. That's what makes us connect to the music. Earth, air, water, and fire. Earth, the drums and the bass. The water, the vocals and the piano. The air, the string arrangements. And the fire is the horns and the guitar. And when you have actual humans playing those actual sounds, you get timeless music like Erykah Badu. Because I'm going to end this how I started it. When we go back to the popular music of the 90s, all of those people that was making all those songs that were the people that were on Vibe magazine and in the industry and the number one song and winning the Grammys, nobody's playing that shit no more. Nobody's playing it anymore. And not because those are bad artists. Well, Ja Rule, Ja Rule just sucked. Excuse me, my bad. But outside of that, we're not casting aspersions on these people as artists or they're saying their music is bad. It's just saying in the 90s, the ingredients were bad. They gave them the newest synthesizer sounds and programs and things like that. And whenever you put the newest, most current sounds and programs into your music, you're literally putting a timestamp on your sound. And it'll be dated and it's going to sound old after a while. But when you have live musicians, and like our brother Mikael said, these are musicians who were deep. They were all about the knowledge. They were all about information. And they put that knowledge and information into their lyrics, and they combine it with live musicians and live musicianship. You get music that's going to last forever. And we as black people, we're going to keep making stuff that lasts forever. We got to make sure that we give love, honor, and respect to those who have done it in the past, turn our children on to those who have done it right, that'll be the formula for us to continue doing it right in the present and in the future. Follow me at DwannB on all these platforms, on Caffeine, on Discord, YouTube, especially my YouTube. My YouTube be popping. This is gonna be popped up on my YouTube tonight or tomorrow. So if you miss any part of this, you can catch it up on my YouTube at DwannB. Same thing it is here. And I'll holler at y'all.